Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Happy Friday. We are back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Joining me is a very special guest, Chinwe Jones, CEO of Trusted Teams. We are talking today about Beyond Funding and Tech, the leadership mindset that scales FinTech. Chinwe, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am doing wonderful.
Thank you for having me again. I think this is the third. Sorry about that. Something was flying. This is the third show I think I've been on.
That's possible. I mean, look, when you're a friend of the show, we stop counting. Like,
okay.
That's great to have our friends of the show on at any time to talk about their expertise, especially when things in the news come up.
Okay, but here's one thing I have to ask question. I saw your nice little banner in the front of the video. How does a friend of the show get elevated to be on the banner?
Oh, that's a great question. You're not on the banner? I thought you were.
I am not on the banner.
Well, it was the banner actually comprises of our first 100 shows.
Okay.
So it depends on the stage of evolution. We've been at this now since 2024, so it's 5 years. So if you were one of the first 100 in one of the first 100 episodes, you made the banner. But like past 200 episodes, and eventually we're going to update the banner. So we update the banner, you'll definitely be on it.
I'm just teasing you, but thanks for letting me know.
It's all love. So before we jump into it, let me just do some housekeeping things. We are streaming live from LinkedIn and YouTube. We also have a separate stream going from Instagram to Instagram people. When I look that way, I'm looking at you. But if you can go to the Tech Behind FinTech, you can watch it live so you can see the guests and not just the side of my face. Okay, on that note, I said today was a special show because besides being a friend of the show and former guest, Chinwe Jones is actually my sister.
Yes, I am.
I have, in rare occasions, I get the opportunity to have my family members on the show to talk about their expertise. And when I do have that opportunity, it is a special day for me. I absolutely love it. All right. So even though I know her extremely well, you might not. So let me do her justice and read her bio, and then we'll get into today's topic. Chinwe Jones, CEO of Trusted Teams and creator of the Burden of Brilliance framework. Chinwe began her career in IT, but after a corporate downsizing, she discovered her true calling, not developing systems, but developing people. Over the past 20 years, she has guided more than 3,000 first-line managers and teams to move from burden to brilliance. Many of the leaders she's coached have risen from being overlooked and overwhelmed to becoming VPs, COOs, and even CEOs of their own companies. As a middle child, Chinwe knows firsthand what it feels like to carry the weight from above and below. The empathy infuses her coaching, where she helps managers lead from purpose, not pressure, transforming disconnected teams to high-performing ones. She also is the co-host of Development Reimagined and the host of Cowboys and Leaders. So,
thank you. I saw you laughed at that whole middle child thing. So go ahead.
For those of I'm her younger brother, so I don't remember giving her any type of problem. So the whole thing about me repeat, as a middle child, Chinwe knows firsthand what it feels like to carry the weight from above and below. She had I don't know what type of weight she was carrying from below, because it definitely wasn't me. So I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder what that weight was.
I have
That's a whole different other show. That's another show.
No clue. So, like we said, we reserve the right to bring back our friends of the show on special days so they can it relates to their expertise and stuff like that. So for those that don't know, today is World Mental Health Day. And let me read what it is. World Mental Health Day is an international day for global mental health education, awareness, and advocacy against social stigma. It was first celebrated in 1992 and the initiative of the World Federation for Mental Health, a global mental health organization with members and contacts in more than 150 countries. So I think it plays well to beyond funding and tech, a leadership mindset that scales fintech. And we really want to get into it because the mindset part, right? We always talk about technology, we talk about expanding businesses, but getting that focus and mindset. So to jump into it, I really like the play on words with your framework, the burden to brilliance. What exactly does that mean?
Sure. What I've noticed is that as I've been coaching for the past 2 decades, there have been a few things that keep on coming up when people come and we sit down and we have these conversations that are causing them stress, like burden. Right now, I don't know if you know, they have a study out there that almost over 80% of the people at work are complaining about workplace stress for a variety of different reasons, right? And so I think that's why it ties well today for the World Mental Health Day. But there are three common things that I see that burden people, right? One I'm going to give you the three C's. One is the circumstances, whatever circumstances are going on in their work life and their professional life. And this could be overwhelming amount of work, not having enough work-life balance, whatever the circumstances are, right? They have that. Then you have comparison, comparing yourself with others. And then the last C is the chasing for capital, whether it be clout, credit from others, or just currency, money, right? Cash. And these three things cause a lot of pressure on people. And so that's the burden part. I don't know if you want to check in before I go into how we move from the brilliance part. But those are the things I noticed. I mean, can you relate? Can you relate what I'm saying about the three C's and that pressure of circumstances, comparing ourselves to others, and the chase of clout, credit, or currency, what I call external validation?
So, it's interesting you brought this up. I was having a conversation yesterday. So for those that don't know, I train jujitsu. It also allows me to be around fighters from different aspects, the amateurs, the professionals. So I was having a conversation with a professional UFC fighter, Pat Sabatini, and he is like a sports psychologist that he's been working with. And it's interesting you said this because he mentioned the 5 negative thought frame, like the five negative thought frameworks or something like that, right? And it's fear. He said that's number one. So you're fearing something in terms of you're looking at, something that doesn't even exist. Anxiety, that's future stuff. Your flaws, hyper focused on that. I want to get this right because literally we were just talking about this. So I'm totally fascinated by it that you just brought this up and it blends well with the conversation. So your failures, so you're kind of now looking at your past mistakes you made. Comparison, similar to what you said, but not only comparing yourself to other people, but comparing yourself to your past self, right? So it might have been a time in your life when you were killing it and now you're not. And then perfection, saying, this is not, it's nothing, no one's perfect. So those 5 things. So now definitely could relate to that. I mean, we were talking about it in the sense of competing and competitions, but it relates to business. Now, when you mention your 3 C's, circumstances, comparison, and chasing, it ties in well. And all of these things happen in the moment. So it wasn't a situation where I planned this conversation at all. Like we was after practicing yesterday, it was like 3 of us having a 4 of us having a really interesting conversation, and that came up. So it relates to the World Mental Health Day for sure. And then it also relates to this conversation. So to answer your question, could definitely relate, because the circumstances part, it's really, sometimes people get caught up in everything going wrong. And I think what happens when something goes wrong, we get so hyper focused on that, but we don't really think about everything going right, right? Because
Mm,
we don't really think about that because it's going right. Woke up today, breathing, healthy. So it's things we take for granted. But, I could stub my toe and then it could have just hurt. I'm like, oh, my toe. And, now I'm going to run and it's going to hurt. And I'm just hyper focused, but I have the ability to still walk or to swim. And we don't get, once we get hyper focused on that, it delays and prevents us from sometimes moving forward. And I like the chasing, right? I mean, look, whether it's business and stuff, we're always chasing some goal. And the thing with the chasing of the goals that and you more than anyone know this about me, because obviously we spend a lot of time together. I'm learning to appreciate the process, appreciate the journey. As cliche as it sounds, fully confident that I'm going to get to the goal or some variation of it, right? But just respecting the process, like, okay, on the way to this goal, maybe things might be a little bit tight. Okay, we knocked out this deal and it's great. We were going for one deal, but two deals happened and it's wonderful. But because of the two deals now, cash flow is a little bit slow. So I got to work out new arrangements with this bank, whatever the case may be. But just understanding, like, just being present with that. So
yeah, I love that. And you're adopting a mindset to be present with that. And I love that. And I want to talk a little bit about the circumstances too, because I think that sometimes we don't appreciate or understand what's going on. And there's two types of circumstances. So there's the circumstances you can control and the circumstances you cannot control. And a lot of times we put a lot of energy on those circumstances we can't control. And that's really that's a losing battle, right? And what I mean by that is like the market. We probably can't. One person can't control the market per se, right? But there's no reason to start focusing on that. And I'm going to give you the jump when we get to that. But I just wanted to make that distinction. But there are circumstances, and I want people to start looking at their circumstances as actually a picture of their past actions and past attitudes and past thoughts, because that's exactly what it is, especially the ones we can control, not the ones we can't control. And when you look at it like that, you realize how much more power you actually have in the present to shift any circumstances that you might not like. So I just kind of want to share that before I move on to the brilliance part.
Yeah, I want to move on to the brilliance part, but we have the luxury of time. I have to, we don't have to rush, right? I want to kind of drill into the circumstances part, because especially in business and fintech, sometimes I've talked to founders that just feel stuck in the circumstance that they're in, whether the trends that they were dependent on is no longer the case. The investor who was going to invest in them all of a sudden backed out or is extremely delayed. Now they can't keep their people on staff. They have to make some really difficult decisions. It could be a plethora of things, right? And you're now in this current situation you find yourself in, and you want to control it. You want to say, okay, what do I have control over? What in my power can I do? And sometimes, you're stuck, right? Whether it's certain policies government policies that may impact your business, maybe, a plethora of things. So how does one deal with the circumstances that they cannot control? How do you shift that? Like, what can you do to regain the power?
Well, the circumstances you can't control, the simplest thing I tell you to do is accept them. Because you can't fight them, right? You can't, there's nothing in your power to shift those circumstances. So by you putting more energy and thought and worry and about these circumstances you can't control, you're fighting a losing battle. And so the thing you have to do is accept them, because as soon as you accept them, then now what you need to do to navigate. And that's when we start going into the what I'm going to recommend, what you do with circumstances to help you get through them.
I want to dive into that though, right? Like, at what point do you accept? Because you're now talking to people that are trying to create new markets, trying to create solutions that did not exist, just came just straight from their mind. Like, you know what? I think I could build this. So they're used to doing the impossible. They're used to taking on those types of challenges. So now you come across a roadblock, right? A blocker. That's what we call it, a blocker. At what point do you recognize that this blocker, because you're not going to just accept it off bat, because that's not how you're wired. You're wired to turn the impossible into possible. So you get this blocker that's beyond your control. At what point do you accept it? Like, how do you know when that point is, we're fighting an uphill battle here? Like, what's that point?
Yeah, I think you have to ask yourself the first question. Is there anything that I can do to minimize this blocker? Is there anybody that I know that can help me minimize this blocker in my influence? So beyond you, right? Then you have to talk about, is there anybody that I know? Is there anybody I can influence to help me with this blocker, right? But once you get beyond that, and there is nothing within your sphere of influence or your sphere of power, then you have to accept the block. It doesn't mean that you couldn't navigate around it. It just means that you have to accept that this blocker. It doesn't mean that you don't take a different direction. Some of the people that you hear their stories, their origin stories, and when they started the thing, they started one way. I forget there was one thing that started, they thought they were going to be sharing pictures, and then it turned into something totally different. So you never know how sometimes these blockers can be a blessing. But the more you try to fight it and struggle with it, knowing that you have no control to move it, you're only hurting yourself.
Okay. I mean, I could accept that. It's just really interesting, because you're just, the mindset is to, just like I said, turn the impossible into possible, and blow through these types of blockers. So I was always curious when you're at a point where you don't want it to feel like you're giving up, and then you're like, you know what, let me accept this and let's pivot and let's try to navigate around it. Because you're not wired to give up, right? That's because you're doing things that people thought were impossible. So
right, I think that this is where, and we're going to get into this later too, but this is where you have to understand what your grounding purpose is, like what ultimately is your purpose. Because if you understand what your purpose is, then that can help you direct and lead and make decisions when something like this happen. But understand what I mean. But I don't want you to take accepting an obstacle or circumstances you can't control as a defeat. It means, let me accept that this thing exists, and now let me see how I operate.
Okay, I can respect that, because when you first said it, it felt like I'm kind of giving up.
I think it's because, I think because you think maybe I know you do, what do you call it, MMA fighting and stuff?
I'm more into grappling, into jiu-jitsu.
Yes. So I know that there's a point where you have to kind of if someone is tapping out, right? So I think you might have been aligning my acceptance with that, per se. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're in a difficult situation. I'm either going to get choked unconscious, or I'm going to get something broke, and I'm going to tap. I mean, you have people that don't, and then you end up in a hospital for 6 months, and it's like, what's the point of that? But
that's what happens with sustained stress. We're talking about World Mental Health Day. When you have sustained stress over time, it leads to health problems, physical health problems. That's why it doesn't make any sense putting all that energy on something or circumstances you can't control, because it's a never winning battle, right? It's a losing battle, and you're putting all your energy, all your worry, all your stress on this thing, and you just keep on losing, instead of saying, hey, this is something I cannot control. Let me accept that I cannot control this, and now let me see what else is around me. Let me navigate. Let me pivot. Let me see what else I can do, how I can succeed, even with this blocker still existing. Let me see how I can succeed. Maybe it's a new strategy. Maybe it's a new direction. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. I want to get into the brilliance part, right? But then I want to circle back on this stress and how it can take on physical manifestations, especially now that it's World Health Day. So definitely want to circle back on that. But I
Right.
know that we kind of diverted a little bit off the brilliance part. So
No,
can
no
you?
problem. I wanted to kind of give you the framework of the burden part of the
Oh,
three C's that I'm seeing. When I work with managers, what I'm seeing that's causing them the most burden, right? And so my job as a coach is to help them shift their perspective on the situation, right? First, letting them know the circumstances you can't control, don't focus your energy there. Focus your energy on the circumstances you can control. And so one of the things that I say to start getting into the brilliance part, especially when dealing with circumstances, is to adopt a leadership mindset, right? And then act accordingly. And so what's a leadership mindset in my sense? What do I think is a leadership? I think we first have to kind of define what leadership is. From my perspective, a leader is one who inspires others towards an uplifting vision that makes us better than we are today. Okay. So that's my definition of leader. And when you think about that definition, there are things that you need to have in your mindset to be able to carry on that role. And things like self-awareness, which is huge, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, valuing connection, valuing communication, being solution oriented. All these things are going to help you carry on that role. I want to really kind of like focus in on self-awareness because I think sometimes people don't see how powerful it is. When I did my coaching certification, it was a 9-month program, and the first 4 months was dedicated for us. And we were like, when are we going to get into the coaching? And the reason why they did that was that they didn't want us to come into a coaching conversation and project our own stuff. And that's the same thing with leaders. It's like you have to be self-aware, know what your stuff is, your strengths, your challenges, your triggers, so that when you're inspiring others, you're not projecting all of that other stuff you're dealing with onto someone else, because that becomes a different thing. Then you're not really inspiring, right? You're projecting.
You know what? I want to get into it. As part of the show, we get comments from our people that are watching it live stream. I like to also give their comments some recognition. So we have a comment from John from YouTube. The difference between humans around the world and me is they judge external circumstances, appearance, etc., while me, on the other hand, is the internal pressure inside you that I'm judging. What are your thoughts on that?
So let me just see if I understand this. It says the difference between humans around the world and me is they judge external circumstances, while me, on the other hand, it's the internal pressure inside you that I'm judging. So it sounds like this person, it might be self-critical.
It looks like he's saying that he doesn't get caught up in the surface level, like
okay, the external level.
The external level, like what people are, how they look, or what they dressed, or something like that. He's on the other hand saying that the internal pressure inside you. But how do you gauge that?
What do you mean by the internal pressure inside of you? Meaning like your own pressure you're giving yourself?
We're both reading this at the same time, I think.
Maybe we asked him to give a little bit more context.
Hey, John, if you can you just give a little bit more context on that so we can kind of dive into your comment? More around the internal pressure inside you that I'm judging. Do you mean yourself, or do you mean others? And if you could break that down in a second comment, it'll be greatly appreciated. Yeah, so let's circle back to the self-awareness part, right? What does it mean to be self-aware?
Like I said, it means you know yourself and you're constantly knowing yourself. One of the other traits in the leadership mindset is a growth mindset, knowing that it's not fixed, right? That where you stand today is not the end of you, that you can always grow and become better. So to me, self-aware is understanding what my emotional triggers are, understanding what my strengths are, understanding what makes me unique, understanding where my challenges are, where the areas I want to grow, like knowing yourself, knowing your preferences, your passions, knowing everything about yourself. To me, that is what being self-aware. And it's a constant journey. It just doesn't stop because we're constantly having experiences and growing.
So if a person is self-aware, how does that help them not project onto, if a leader's self-aware, right? How does that help them not project onto others, as you mentioned?
Sure. So let's say that you are in, like you just said, like let's say you're in a, let me give you the simplest thing. Let's say that you're in FinTech and you just lost some funding and now you have to let go of people. This leader might be like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing. I can't do this. I can't, I can't take livelihood away. They're like projecting all these things that would mean for them, but they don't really know how the other person is going to respond. I think sometimes we take some general situations, especially with feedback. I have a lot of times where managers are having problems with feedback. And one of the things I say to them is you're going in there thinking that you're going to harm them in some way. And I want you to shift and look at feedback as a gift that you're giving them. And when you make that shift, it just changes. But they're putting all of what they might be feeling, and if they have to receive constructive feedback before they actually go give the feedback.
Can't one say that's considered a form of empathy?
You have to, I think that the difference for me with empathy is that you're not being dragged down in the emotion of it, right? You can still try to kind of feel into what someone might be going through, especially if you know them, but then not feeling like you have to be in the emotional depression or sadness. Like their emotions are getting in the way of them being able to kind of like move forward.
So you're a non-emo, you're showing non-emotional empathy.
No, it's what I mean by it is that sometimes people, let me ask you this. Do you think me giving guidance to someone that is sad and depressed, you think me being sad is going to help that person?
No, you know the funny thing when we're talking about this, because you know who I think about, right? When because who in our family do I think about with these types of conversations?
I don't think we should call her out, but we know. Go ahead. I'm not saying that you're not sensitive to the feelings, but what I'm saying, you yourself don't have to, I don't think I have anything on, but you yourself don't have to feel the feelings.
No, I understand. And it's so funny. So for those that could tell by my last name, not Chinwe's last name, we have a Nigerian background. That's where our family's from. And how do I say this? Growing up, it's not about emotion. The type of emotion you see is, okay, if you're not doing well in school or something, then it's the end of the world emotion. But in other circumstances, it's not that, I don't know, you never get the feeling that someone's feeling down by giving you constructive criticism. I guess that's the corporate way of saying at all. You never feel that. It is a very aggressive, this is a situation, this is how you're going to fix it, in a non-American accent. But yeah, so I totally understand what you're saying in regards to it. It's you, this, and just to paraphrase it from my own voice so I can make sure it sinks in, I could approach it from a point of view where I have an understanding of what you're going through. I don't necessarily, I'm not emotionally bogged down by it. And I'm saying, you know what, this is the situation. Like, one of the things I always say to people, like, this is a situation. I always frame it first, like, this is the situation that we find ourselves in. And then I go from there, right? Because I don't like to make it seem like it's something it's not. Like, this is a situation. Mm-hmm. And now where do we go from here, right? Mm-hmm. And I like what you said in terms of the feedback. And sometimes giving constructive feedback to someone you're working with, that's reporting to you, it can seem a little bit, it can seem hard, but if you look at it as a gift, right? Wow, we have a comment from the audience. Let's see. Wow, Dr. Nguzio, who says, "I'm so happy you can call that person out." Wow, yeah, that part. That's
I can't help but start laughing.
Okay. Nguzio Swagu is our older sister. So she's a OBGYN. Check out her website and so forth, and her LinkedIn page. Yeah. All right. So back to the conversation, right? So, it is, I definitely like that part though. Like, you have to look at it as a gift that you're giving them.
Because you want to if your intention is to make them better, which usually should be a leader's intention when you're giving constructive feedback, right? Is to make the person better, right? Ultimately, you make that person better, that person is going to contribute to the organization and make the organization better. But that's really the goal of giving feedback, right? How do we make this situation better? Starting with the person that you're giving feedback to.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. I totally see that. Let me pivot a little bit, right? Oh no, I want to jump back into what you said about stress before we go into any other questions.
Okay,
so,
and I haven't finished the framework, just to let you know, but go ahead.
No. I wanted to get through the framework before we get back to the stress.
Okay.
Let's do the framework.
Okay, so from circumstances, like I said, you got to know the difference between the ones you can control and the ones you can't. And the ones you can't control, you do acceptance. The ones you can't control, you adopt a leadership mindset and you act accordingly, right? And then for the comparison, one of the things that, if I can say this on the loudest mountain, we are unique in our own light. We have brilliance to share with the world. There is never going to be another Anamdi. There's never going to be another Chinwe, right? There's never going to be another person like us. Our experiences, the ways we connect, everything is so different. And instead of worrying about comparing yourself to others, what I want you to do is affirm your unique brilliance and then amplify it, right? Affirm your unique brilliance and then amplify it. And then the last part with the chase about capital, credit, or clout, or currency, these are all external validations. And when they're taken away, or when you're not able to get to it, that's what causes the burden and the pressure. And what I think we're at a point now, especially in the society that we live in, we're at a point now where we need to start to acknowledge our own purpose, right? Our internal purpose. And actually, after we acknowledge it, we need to ascend, right? And when I say ascend, I mean, I start thinking about the Maslow pyramid needs. And in the Maslow pyramid needs, you have physiological needs, you have safety, you have social, but now it starts moving up. You have esteem, self-esteem and self-respect, self-worth, and then up, self-actualization, purpose. And when we start to acknowledge what our own purpose, the legacy we want to leave, let that be the thing that we pursue, because no one can take that away from you. And it's not anything. And then what happens is every time you operate from that place of purpose, you feel fulfilled in your everyday work.
Yeah, no, that's a few things I want to unpack, right? So that has been a major point that you talked about, in everyone being unique, right? We're like snowflakes. And this has been a topic on from various speakers and different things like that. As we start getting more, as AI starts really taking a hold of various things, right? Even to the point now, it's affecting the film industry, and you have certain actors speaking out because of the potential to be replaced by AI actors. It's, most of the blogs that you see now on social media, and a lot of the content is generated by AI. And one of the biggest ways for individuals to counter that is to lean on your unique experiences, especially at work, especially the things you bring to the table, whether as a leader, as an employee, as an entrepreneur, as whoever you are, because that is what sets you apart from a bot.
Exactly.
Like, and then when you're, and it's a really interesting point you get to when all of your various unique your background and the various things that or experience, when you're able to kind of bring that to the table in a very seamless way, it becomes magic. And to your point, that is your biggest differentiating factor, right?
Exactly.
It's sounding like another individual. It's not, oh, I'm trying to be. No, it's certain attributes that we all say, you know what, I get motivated by X, Y, and Z. This is a good thing. When you really fall back on, okay, what sets me apart, and how do I amplify this?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you mentioned this whole thing with AI. I think what we're not realizing, everybody has a different reaction to it. Some people are scared of it. Some people are like, oh, it's going to take my job away. Some people are like, oh my God, what's going on? And I think what we have to understand is that we have been moving through revolutions, right? We started with the first industrial revolution, and that was around like mass transportation, and the second industrial revolution, that was about mass production with manufacturing. Now the third revolution was the information age. And now this fourth revolution, what some people might be calling the imagination age, but I like to call it the intelligence age. And if we're moving from the point, when you think about that first or second industrial revolution, where it's like we're putting people in seats and says, this is what I want you to do, just do it. We're moving away from that, because now we have AI, and what we need to start tapping into our people as leaders of these FinTechs is starting to ask, what do you think from your perspective? Because everybody that sits in your seat, in your company, whether it's 4 or 50, however many, each person has something to contribute to your company, and they're there for that point in that moment. And if you're not tapping into it, you're losing out on it. You just don't know how bigger your vision can be until you start tapping into the unique individual brilliance in each of your team members.
No, it's a whole thing around neurodiversity, just, getting people from different backgrounds, like from a mental standpoint, right? Because you can harness power in that and see, okay, you know what? Because everyone thinks different. So if you have people in a room that all think the same, it's hard to generate new ideas. That's just bottom line. Like similar background, similar whatever, it's really hard to generate new ideas, and it's hard to lean on that perspective. It's not bad if you want to get same ideas and keep doing the same old thing. But if you're really trying to make, massive change and impact various people around the world, how do you do that from a global perspective if you just have this, like, everyone thinks the same and you're not really leaning on those unique qualities that you mentioned, just off bat, just from a scientist perspective, right? I'm a extreme tech background, right? And it's always like, how do we create these solutions? How do we leverage, different, like, from a mental standpoint? How do we get these type of neurodivergent people to get, like, to figure things out and get the different perspective and get figure out things we haven't even thought of yet, right? So I always find that really interesting. Wanna
I think we have to give space too. I think that as leaders of companies, we have to, because you brought in neurodivergent, we have to give space to everybody not expressing in the same way, everybody not interacting in the same way, and that there's still intelligence in them, and acknowledge that. But we have to give space to it. We have to nurture it. And I think even in our school systems, we have to start doing a better job in nurturing independent thinking of our children, so that when they grow and they're going after jobs and stuff, that they're all right in their own brilliance. They can express it. They can be proud of it.
You know what? And back to falling on mental health and everything like that. How do you deal with situations like that as a leader? Like, you want to harness the uniqueness of your the people in your care. You want to leverage it, but if people are not sharing feedback, how do you pull that out?
When you mean they're not sharing feedback, they're not giving it?
Not, like you said, like, some people have different ways of expressing themselves, so they may not be as forthcoming to say, this is what I think. This is, and to lend their opinion, and which will harness their unique background. But
Right.
if not sharing it, how do you?
Well, I think, yeah, I think everybody shares in different ways. So I think what it is you have to understand how they're sharing, right? Again, I don't want to act like I'm an expert in neurodivergent workers in the workplace and how to manage. I don't want to say that, but one of the things is that you have to whether get more insight on the type of workers you have, and figure out how do you engage them, actively engage in a way that they can share, and in what ways are they sharing, so that you understand that when they are sharing, you're receiving the information that they want to give you.
That's good stuff. We have a question from the audience, Dr. Ngazio Swagu. How do you ignore the external noise? Do you think your advice is generational? How do you teach the young generation where social media plays a role in terms of comparison?
Yeah. And I don't think that the comparison just is with the younger generation. I think that we've always set up in the space of comparisons, whether we compare ourselves to celebrities or people out there in the public. I think that it really starts with that self-awareness, right? It starts with you getting to know yourself. I think one of the things we don't even realize, even our caretakers are playing a part. When I say caretakers, I mean from whoever's taking care of you when you were growing up, is playing the part to sometimes project their situations on us. And that starts building some insecurities within us. I just heard a speaker recently, it was crazy, talk about the CEO of Whole Foods. And he interviewed him, and he said that his mother always wanted him to be a doctor, and she was always like felt negative about that he was a grocer. She called him a grocer, not like the CEO of Whole Foods. And then even in her dying bed, her regret was that he never became a doctor. So we don't even know what our experiences, and this man has built a $40 billion company, right? We don't know, even in our experiences through how we are being cared, how much of that has the insecurity. So I think it starts with us having self-awareness, taking time to affirm ourselves, affirm our uniqueness, affirm where we're brilliant, and to build up. But when we start to get self-aware, we start to uncover some of those things that we didn't even realize why we were chasing the external validation. It might have been something earlier in our childhood. Because every time I have coaching situations or coaching conversations, these managers, and they give me information, and sometimes it's all the way back to what happened to them in third grade or something that happened at home. You just never know what those insecurities are that you grew up in. And so why I'm a big advocate of getting self-aware, understanding where some of your triggers, why is this important? Why is it important to you to compare yourself? What's going on there? Asking those questions.
That example that you gave of the Whole Foods CEO and his mother, is she Nigerian? That is the most Nigerian word.
I don't know. I would have to.
All the companies like the doctor. This guy sells groceries. It's like, dude, like what? That's crazy.
But you can tell that that's still, even though he laughed it off, like the speaker that was telling us he laughed it off, but you can tell it impacted him still because he's still sharing the story, right?
No, but that is just like that is funny. That is funny. Yeah. So back to the topic. Do you think early stage founders undervalue leadership because they're chasing product market fit?
Do I think, say that again, early stage founders?
Yeah. So, like you talk about like leadership and these things that sometimes people, it doesn't seem as tangible, right? Like my product, my market, does it fit in? Are users on it? Are we getting customers? Those seem like tangible metrics, KPIs that we can measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that they undervalue leadership?
Right. I don't want to speak for all of them because I do think that there's some FinTechs that really have some smart people at the helm and they engage with their people. So I think that you have a market or industry that is focused and saying, hey, this is what you need to focus on, product fit, right? Until the next thing happens and they say you need to focus on this. Because I was reading research and they said that one of the biggest reasons why FinTechs fail is because of regulatory compliance. So it's like within the first 3 years, 73% of FinTechs are going to fail. And one of the things they're finding, 64% of that is because of regulatory compliance, and about 42% is because of the lack of banking integration. So now you see this rise about moving from product fit to, let's now look at regulatory compliance, if that's going to make it. But one of the things for the people that may be in that situation that undervalue leadership, you're talking about there's no metrics to it. I think what we forget at the end of the day, everything that we do involves people. That's what it does. It involves people. So whether you are telling the story to inspire your investors to invest in you, or you're telling the story to inspire your niche market to invest, to buy into your FinTech, you're doing it already. The question is, why don't we turn it to our team members, right? I think that we're still sometimes treat team members as like we're back in the Industrial Revolution, like, hey, just do this, and this is all you have to do to make this happen, instead of engaging them, inspiring them, finding out what's important to them, and connecting the dots of what's important to them to the vision of the company so they can be inspired on a different level. So those are my thoughts about that.
You see certain situations where some founders are highly technical. So they started the company because they can actually solve the problem, and they are building, they built the MVP, they might do this experimentation. Now the idea is catching on and they're bringing people on. That's not necessarily say they're naturally trained leaders. They were like, look, I know how to do this. So now it's almost like the player coach syndrome, right? Where this guy's a phenomenal player, right? I mean, look at you're a fan of MJ, and when he went to the Wizards, right? It's like phenomenal player in his day, right? Best basketball player in historically, right? People may argue. regardless of which, top 5. So to eliminate the argument. But being now in a situation where you're really great, now you have to coach people. You have to lead a team now. And you can be very frustrated that they're not rising up to your greatness. Right?
No, you're right. And it's not just happening only in FinTech. I see this all the time in a lot of different industries where you have an individual contributor that's really brilliant, and then they promote them to lead others. I think in some way they thought there was going to be some kind of Vulcan melt, and they can take their brilliance and give it to their teams and make them better. But that's not how it works, right? But they have no skills in leading others. And so this is why I come in and help do leadership workshops with first-line managers. But you're right. And what I've seen in those situations with those highly technical FinTech is they usually have, like, whether their friend or they find somebody else that can tell the story, because they know they're not skilled at coaching others. So they'll have a COO. And you usually see like 2 people where one is about the technology and one is about the people.
Really, like, help me out understand this whole telling of the story, because you mentioned it a few times. Break that down to me.
So when I talk about telling of the story, I mean, when you think about a vision and you want to inspire others towards that vision, that uplifting vision, what do you have to do, right? You have to, what you're doing is you want to get them bought into that vision. You want to get them excited about that vision so that they can follow along. So it's not only you having to drag them at each step, they want to be a part of it, right? And in everything in FinTech, that's what happens with investors, right? You want to get them bought into the vision so much they want to throw money at you. So that's what I mean by telling the story. It's like, why is this important? Why is this particular technology going to shift and make us better as a community? And where are all the people that need this, right? So that's what I mean by telling the story.
And it sounds like you're constantly telling that story.
You definitely want to. Yeah, because people connect to stories. People link up to stories, and they get inspired by that. That's what touches their heart. So whether you're telling the story to your investors or you're telling your story to potential customers, the missing piece sometimes that I see is, why are we not telling this story more with our team members and continue telling the story, but open the space for them to be a part of it too now, by you inviting them to understand what's their brilliance. Why did they pick your company to come in? What's their connection? Because the more you can do that, the more you're going to get these engaged people that want to go to the end with you. I mean, it's the same thing that we all follow Simon Sinek and that why story. He talks about the 2 different teams, the one that had all the money and everything in building the planes and the one that didn't really have it, but they had people that were engaged, and they were the ones that saw it through.
You know what? In hearing you talk about it, it's like, I just thought about this. Not only do you want to tell your story and have your people understand your story, you want to also create storytellers, right? Ambassadors that can now blend in their, and I'm freestyling here, right? But it just hit me as you were talking, but they're blending in their unique experiences and their story into yours, and they're now retelling it, right? It's almost like remember the phone, what do you call it? The message game you used to play when you get kids in line, and every time they add another part.
Add something to it, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like that's what you want to create, right? Because now people are telling that story. It's like when I'm not an iPhone guy, just saying it. I get a whole lot back from people around me about that. But I know people who are, and they're just so excited when a new one comes out. So they're now part of that story, and they could talk about, the history of it and of their particular history of buying it and that feeling and things of that nature. But it's like you're creating ambassadors for your story.
Right. I think right now, especially in the age that we're in, that it's almost essential that we start shifting the way leaders deal with their team members, especially when you have like small units in FinTech, and start thinking about it as, this person is here for a purpose, not just to do their role, but they're here to add in a special way. And until we start asking the question, right, and still getting to know our team members. And I think that's the number one thing you can do as a leader when you start talking about building trusted teams, is to just open the space to get to know your team members and also let them know you, right? Because we trust what we know. And so when we start to create this space where you start getting to know your team members and what's important to them, you can start telling them the story about how they're so pivotal in this company because of what they bring, right? And really kind of amplify that for them and affirm that for them. And you'll be surprised what will happen. These team members will get so engaged and so connected to what you're doing. Like you said, they will go out being ambassadors in places that you didn't even ask them to be ambassadors. So that's the way, if we start really thinking, especially in the age that we're in, and we start talking about not just looking at, not to say that you don't need funding, right, and technology for FinTech, but really start looking at the individual brilliance in your teams and seeing how well you're tapping into that.
If there was ever a way to end a show, that was it. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I could talk to you forever, obviously. We could keep going on and on, but I have to respect your time. So what we do for our guests is we give you a few moments to talk about your company, how people can find you, and so forth. So when you're doing that, I'm going to get off stage and allow you to do that.
Hi, my name is Chinwe Jones from Trusted Teams, and I help companies basically bridge the gaps, the trust gaps in their organization, and help transform outcomes by basically some of the things we talked about there, helping you kind of look at the individual brilliance of your teams and amplifying that, and helping you develop your leaders to another level. So if you want to have a conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn. Like he said earlier, I do a show every Tuesday called Cowboys and Leaders. You can tap into that. And I also do a podcast that's available on the podcast called Development Reimagined, where we just have all types of different ideas about different ways that you can reimagine developing your team members. Thank you.
Put the Trusted Teams website there. Listen, I really want to thank our guest, Chinwe Jones, for coming and joining us today. I want to thank also everyone who commented and everyone who viewed. But I always say, whether you're watching the show today, tomorrow, or next year, we appreciate your viewership. Also, be sure to go to the techbehindfintech.com. We have a free newsletter that goes out every week. You definitely want to get on our newsletter list. And let me put the link out right now so you can subscribe, and you'll be up to date on FinTech news and also all the wonderful guests that we have scheduled. I mean, look, we've been fortunate to be doing this show for quite a few years, so we have back-to-back guests for the year. So it should be really great conversations you do not want to miss. So definitely go to the Tech Behind FinTech /subscribe. You can be on the list, and you'll know what's coming every Friday. Yeah.
Can I share one thing? I just want to thank you for your brilliance, because I know a few things about you, and I know that you love telling stories. I know you love sharing information, and you've created a platform here called Tech Behind FinTech that's helping the FinTech community learn about each other. You're giving platforms for micro owners, business owners to tell their story. And I just want to thank you and applaud you for doing that, for kind of looking at the things that you enjoy, bringing it together to uplift the community. So I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a first, but it's like when someone gives you a compliment, you're like, I'm flustered. If I was a little bit more lighter skin, you'll see some blushing going on. But yeah, no, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And to mention, this episode is sponsored by Sweating Equity. So really cool concept, guys. Tech Behind FinTech, we're talking about a topic. It's more so you can learn about a particular topic. Sweating Equity is a show that we have that we're going to be kicking off more in 2026 and so forth, in which we are talking about the individual leader and getting back. And the twist is we're talking to them while they're going through an extreme workout. And that is a really fun conversation. We did shoot our pilot, and we yet to release it, but it's going to be some really fun times and seeing them in really difficult situations. So that the show is sponsored by Sweating Equity. And on that note, sister, guest, friend of show, Chinwe Grace Jones, thank you very much for joining. I don't want this conversation to end, but it has to.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
You take care. Have a great weekend. Until all of everyone else, have a great weekend. Thanks for joining.
Have a great weekend.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.